All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Picture this. A college freshman comes home for winter break, sits their extremely anxious, conscientious parents down, and says, "Mom, Dad, I'm majoring in art history." You know the reaction, right? Absolute dread. Usually, that statement is the ultimate punchline of a college major. But today, we're going to completely flip that script. We are exploring how a degree that's so often treated as a cultural joke might actually be our ultimate survival guide in the age of artificial intelligence. It turns out those foundational skills might be exactly what we need to thrive in a crazy, fast-changing, tech-driven world. We're starting things off with a brilliantly provocative thought from Oscar Wilde. All art is quite useless. Because, let's be honest, traditionally art history is treated as a totally useless degree, at least when you measure it purely by immediate practical job prospects. You know, if people aren't using art history as the punchline, they swap in French poetry or folklore. The underlying assumption is literally always the same. If it doesn't directly build a tangible product or get you climbing a corporate ladder, what's the point? Wilde is hitting the nail on the head here regarding this weird inverse relationship between something's practical function and its value as fine art. But instead of running away from this whole idea of uselessness, we're actually going to embrace it. We are going to celebrate it. And we really have to rethink this, especially right now, with the skyrocketing cost of education and entire fields of work just being totally disrupted overnight. We have to ask ourselves, is college just an on-ramp for career training, or is it a place to learn how to live more successfully and intentionally? If the whole point is simply to get on a career path, well, soaring tuition and the fact that recent grads can't even find that on-ramp suggests the current system is kind of failing us. We desperately need fresh thinking here. Interestingly enough, a ton of highly effective business leaders actually started out in the humanities. Why? Because instead of just rigidly training for one specific job that might not exist in 5 years, they learned to be incredible communicators and leaders who can totally recalibrate their thinking on the fly. Which brings us to Section 1, the artificial intelligence disruptor. We are undeniably at this massive historical inflection point where AI is just decisively disrupting the world of work and transforming entire fields of learning. Students entering the workforce today, they are going to make their mark based on old, static forms of knowledge because, let's face it, machines can already do all that. Futurist Kevin Kelly frames this perfectly. He says that when answers become cheap, good questions become more difficult and therefore way more valuable. Think about it. When you can prompt an AI and get a deeply complex answer in like 3 seconds flat, the answer itself loses its premium value. It's cheap. The real currency of the future isn't knowing the answer, it's possessing the critical thinking required to actually ask the right question. So that leaves us with a pretty urgent question for our future. How do we actually learn to frame these better, more valuable questions? Well, surprise, surprise, the humanities, and specifically the deep contemplative study of subjects like art history, actually hold the exact toolkit we need. These supposedly discounted realms of human knowledge are entirely built around evaluating nuance, challenging our assumptions, and looking closely at the spaces between the data points. They literally train us to be careful, hypercritical thinkers. Here's the crucial distinction. AI can instantly summarize pre-existing reactions to give us information, but true knowledge? That requires the unique context that only human beings bring to the equation. Generative AI is mind-blowing for sure, but we absolutely cannot confuse information with knowledge. If you train a piece of software to analyze an image, its output is just a summary of the reactions that humans have already left behind. Building actual knowledge means we have to bring our own messy, beautiful humanity to the table. We have to actively engage in the conversation, not just, read the Spark Notes of it. Moving on to Section 2, looking versus actually seeing. Now, we live in this hypervisual modern world. We share more pictures daily than at any other point in human history. Visuals are literally the primary way we communicate right now. Yet, ironically, almost none of us are ever required to take a single course in how to actually study or contemplate visual arts. We are constantly flooded with images, but we aren't organizing our thinking around them. Art historian Jennifer Roberts draws a really vital distinction here. She says looking is just sensory perception. But to actually see something, like really see a complex Picasso painting, you have to make sense of it. Think about Picasso's famous masterpiece, Guernica. You could easily use a computer to scrape vast amounts of data about it, the dimensions, the historical timeline, the exact color palette. But software cannot experience the painting. Looking is just physical. Seeing requires you to overcome the initial discomfort of a weird or abstract image and stick with it until you find deeper understanding. Too often, we just amble by like tourists, looking at everything but seeing absolutely nothing. To give you a super practical example, let's say we feed a photograph of a young boy to an AI. What does it do? It merely recognizes the data points and the surface-level image. The machine scans the pixels, identifies the shape of a human face, maybe guesses the age and the lighting conditions. It is a highly efficient process of cataloging measurable data. But here's the thing. Cherished photos, much like great works of art, are not just data points. As media critic Neil Postman noted way back in his 1984 book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, images are actually incredibly inefficient ways of knowing things without human context. Why? Because it's the viewer who supplies the memory and concepts, like the concept of brotherhood, to that picture. When human looks at that exact same photograph of a young boy, it comes alive. It resonates. It inspires us. The photograph itself doesn't inherently explain the complex idea of friendship. It just repeats the exact same visual message over and over. It is our human interaction with that object that actually provides the context for any real meaning. And this brilliantly illustrates why context is absolutely crucial. Because despite all the visual assumptions you might instantly make about that photograph, that boy is actually not my brother. When we only look at things at face value, without the rigorous evaluation that a subject like art history teaches us, we get stuck at a very primary and honestly often incorrect way of knowing the world. We give up the possibility of a truly significant, truthful experience simply because we assume the surface tells the whole story. Which brings us to Section 3, the deep value of the useless. So you might be wondering, why sit around looking at old art in a dark room? What is it actually good for? Well, it turns out that engaging deeply with human creativity helps us figure out exactly what we value from our past, which is directly tied to how we make meaning right now in our present reality. The real-world benefits here are immense. Studying human creativity connects us globally. It triggers these peak human experiences of awe, that same feeling you get standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon. And it helps us forget our hyper-planned, anxiety-ridden modern lives. When you stand in front of a timeless piece of art, it demands a fresh perspective. It expands our idea of who we are, and it allows us to exist entirely in the moment, moving us way, way beyond the stressful, reactive planning minds we use to just get through our daily routines. And it goes even deeper. Thinkers like Professor Padilla Peralta show us that evaluating history asks new questions that push way beyond traditional Western norms. Ultimately, this levels the playing field for future discourses. You see, art history isn't just about parroting the same cultural facts over and over again. Today, it's about asking entirely new, sometimes uncomfortable questions. By looking globally and actively shattering known certainties, we invite voices into the conversation that have historically been totally excluded. This is literally how we test drive our future discourses. So the major takeaway here is this. Taking time for culture, slowing down to stroll through our shared human story rather than just mindlessly doom-scrolling on our phones, that is exactly how we equip ourselves to live fully in the present. Think about the best conversations you have around the water cooler. People come absolutely alive when they talk about a trip to Paris or something amazing they experienced at the Louvre. We could all seriously benefit from stepping back from our screens just to contemplate the thread of humanity that pulls through the objects we leave behind. So the next time a student decides to choose a perfectly useless degree to navigate our totally unpredictable, AI-driven future, what are you going to do? Will you join in, ask better questions, and actually celebrate their choice? As we stand right on the edge of this massive technological shift, discounted realms of human knowledge, like art history, are exactly what will help us persist. They teach us to truly see rather than just casually look. They teach us to question rather than just blindly accept whatever answer a machine spits out. So I'll leave you with this one final thought. When faced with a world where machines can do almost everything, will you recognize that the most useless human skills are actually your greatest advantage?